Hey there, in this video, I'm going to go over the most common question that I get, which is how do I set up my Go High level? Maybe you're starting from scratch, or maybe you have a setup already, but it's not as good as you'd like. And so I've broken it down into a very simple 3-step process that if you follow this process, you will not run into the issue where you've built a lot of things and then you have to go back and fix everything kind of from scratch and kind of redo the whole system. So it's going to be a big time saver. So let's jump into it. All right, now the first question to ask yourself is, do you need a CRM in general? This is going to be almost step zero because I've run into this issue where people are building out this whole system because they think they need it. They've got CRM envy and they don't actually need it. So just be clear about what it is that your goals are and just make sure that a CRM would actually help with that. I've actually had a example of a client who wanted a CRM, but after talking to them, they really just needed a spreadsheet that would allow them to organize their contacts. And so they ended up going with that instead. And it just saved a lot of implementation time to have to avoid that, right? And so I would say that about 80% of people who think they need a CRM are correct, maybe even 90% actually. But this is just a quick check just to make sure that that's the right situation. Okay, so let's jump into the 3 steps. Step number 1 is going to be to identify your pipeline and set up your tracking. So this is widely misunderstood. And if you look at any of the big companies such as HubSpot or Salesforce, they have entire best practices on what a pipeline should be and how to set it up. And so this is going to be an example pipeline. And the way it works is as you move from the left to the right, you want to get closer to the deal. Now, a very common mistake that I see is they will put actions inside this pipeline. So for example, as soon as a new lead comes in, I'm going to call them once, and then I'm going to call them twice, and then I'm going to call them 3 times. That does not work. And the reason is because when you look at the data or analytics, it's going to look like they're getting closer to the deal, and they're not actually, right? And in fact, it doesn't actually matter how many calls you do. You just want them to move to the next step. And so this is a simplified version, and I hope this illustrates how simple the pipeline can be. And what you want to do, and I'll just explain this real quick. So a new inquiry comes in. An active lead means they've started a conversation with you, they've booked an appointment, and then they've purchased some kind of loyalty program. Now, what you'll notice is that each one of these steps are outcomes. And so you can measure how well those outcomes do. And then the other important thing is you want to measure how well you move in between each one of these outcomes. So for example, what percentage of people do we move from in the inquiry stage into the booked appointment stage, right? That could be a really important metric. How many people are booked an appointment and then move over to the loyalty program, right? And so those are really, really important stages. Something else that I'll quickly note here is that there is actually statuses as well. So lost, abandoned, and won. And so if you're thinking, oh, I need a lost stage, you actually probably already have that as a status. And so you probably don't need that. And so these are differences. I'll go more in depth on this in general, but you do need to understand what your pipeline process is going to be like. Now, the second part of this, step 1, is that you need to have tracking in place. So every single one of your sources, you need to first identify what those are. So common ones are like website, SEO, Google My Business, Facebook ads, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, cold email outreach, conferences, right? All of those things need to be identified and then having some kind of mechanism to actually put them into the pipeline. So this one, as an example, this is a test. You can see the source is right here in this small gray text, which is Facebook ads. If I click onto it, I can see that opportunity source is right there. This is what the tracking and sources workflows might look like. And so we've got chat widget, we've got GMB, we've got Facebook message, we've got Facebook ads. All these different workflows are going to identify where people came from. And something you also want to think about is you want to consider if this workflow should only look at the first source that somebody came from. Should we allow multiple opportunities when people come from different sources? The answer is sometimes yes, the answer is sometimes no. And so it's very important to figure those questions out before you make these workflows, because it's a huge mess if you get your tracking not built correctly from the start, and you'll have to go back and redo it, and it'll be a huge headache. So, yep, you want to track your opportunities. Do you need any kind of special filter when you do track these opportunities? Do you want to integrate tools such as Google Analytics or Facebook Pixel so that when an action occurs, you can put that information back into Google or Facebook so that you can get better results for your ads? So that is going to be step 1. Step 2 is you're going to have a nurture sequence and a sales interaction. So the nurture sequence is designed to get people from the current stage that they're in to the next stage of the pipeline. And as a reminder, if this was our pipeline, the whole point of getting somebody who's in an inquiry stage is to get them over into an active lead. And so we would think of like automations that would try to get people to respond, right? And so we would say something like, hey, John, thanks so much for reaching out. What were you interested in today, right? Or why did you want to reach out? And so those kinds of automations would make sense to move them into the active lead. Once we get a conversation going, again, just referring to this pipeline, your pipeline might be different. But as an example, once people respond, how do we get them to book an appointment? So, hey, John, that sounds great. Here's a booking link. I'd love to talk and go over next steps, right? And then once they book an appointment, how do we make them show up to an appointment? Could be another step. Or how do we make sure that their loyalty program is purchased if we get them to book and attend that appointment? All right. This is another really common mistake that I see, and it's really important how you set up your, I guess, workflow infrastructure so that they don't double up. So, for example, if you get a new Facebook lead and then you have an onboarding sequence to try to get them to book an appointment, but they fill out a form also on your website 1 minute later, sometimes you'll have two workflows and they'll send the same exact messages every single day, which doesn't make sense. And so you'd want to separate out your nurtures, for an example, to make sure that they don't double up in those nurture sequences. Another really common one is that they will not be removed from a previous nurture. So if you're trying to get someone to book in and they book in, how do you stop that nurture from happening in the future? How do you make the correct infrastructure so that you don't run into that mistake, right? So those are really important things to consider with the nurture sequences. When you set up your nurture sequence, you're going to need to set up your SMS and your email settings correctly. I have other videos on that, but they are required steps. Otherwise, pretty much the nurture won't work. Then you need to have your sales team infrastructure. So where is your sales team going to jump into the CRM? How do they automate? How do they interact with automated sequences? What tasks should they be doing every day? That's really important. If you just throw a sales team at a CRM and they don't know how to use it, they'll default to using the pipelines. And often the pipelines is actually the worst place to manage the leads. There are things such as manual actions, there's tasks, there's power dialers, there's text templates, everything like that. And those are usually a much more efficient way to build a process that you actually want to use consistently and that you can measure and improve that process over time. And a lot of people don't know how those work. And so that's important to get kind of an expert to walk you through that process. And then lastly, you'll probably want to create SOPs on those processes once you define them so that your salespeople actually know how to use that process. All right. And then step number 3. So we've already identified our pipeline. We've set up tracking. We've got nurtures to move people across the pipeline. Honestly, that is like probably one of the biggest hurdles to get over. If you can do those things well, then that's a pretty good use of the CRM. But then you're going to want to move over into value-added systems. So systems that might include, it could be collecting customer feedback, doing testimonials, having that as an automated process. You can reactivate inactive customers with targeted campaigns. You can set up a process for recruiting and onboarding new employees, which is really valuable and often not done with CRMs. You can automate the onboarding process for new hires. And then you can implement additional value systems such as loyalty programs, customer surveys, performance incentives, lots of extra things. I should put referrals as well. I should write that down. Lots of extra things that you can do. And they're very, very valuable, but you do need to have the core structure in place, which is going to be step 1 and 2. All right, so that is the basic overview of how to set up your account. And as you can see, there's little steps in between there that if you get one little thing wrong, it can mess up the entire system and you'll have to go back and redo it from the start. If you want to get your CRM built right from the start and have it working very quickly, then I recommend you either click the link on this video or you go over to optimizedoutreach.com. Then you can book a call with me and I'll be sure to walk you through exactly what you need to do for your process, customizing this 3-step process into your business as well. Thanks so much, and I look forward to talking to you soon.